Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio, and probably one of the best shows I've ever done. And I'm going to say it to Colin's face right here in the camera, because you're here. The best show I've ever done of Geek Therapy Radio.
You flatter me.
Geek Therapy Radio Facebook, Geek Therapy Radio YouTube, all the social media. Just go to the Google, like your grandpa says, the Google, and type in Geek Therapy Radio, and you'll find it. You should also type in, on Colin's behalf, "This does not compute," and follow and like and subscribe all his stuff, especially the YouTube, because that's the bread and butter. Right?
And what a small amount of bread and butter it actually is.
See, one of my most popular videos I have on my channel is something that I did before I even had the radio show. Colin, I'm about to drop a bomb on you, which might make me the king geek of all time. That's a big claim.
That is a big claim.
Okay, I'll set it up like this. Several months ago, maybe a year ago, I think right when I started my show, so several months ago, I said, you know what? I never had a Commodore 64 growing up, so I want to go buy a Commodore 64. So I went on Craigslist and I found a guy, an electrical engineer who refurbishes Commodore 64s.
Nice.
So here's the big geek part. Here's the geek bomb. I hopped in my 1983 DeLorean to go buy a Commodore 64. So
there you go.
That's it. That's the geek bomb. It doesn't get any more retro, any more geek than I'll show up to buy.
Although I've got a bit of a geek bomb for you.
All right.
When I was a little kid, and still now, I was a huge fan of Back to the Future. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm fortunate enough to have an aunt who worked for Universal Studios theme park division back in the early 90s.
Okay.
Right around the time that they opened the Back to the Future ride in Orlando.
Awesome.
I got to sit in one of the DeLoreans from the movie.
Like one of the actual on-screen used.
The hero car. They had 7 of those that they used. Some of them were more for the wide shots.
Yeah.
Where it was like stunt drivers doing it.
Right.
But they had one that was for all the up close when they're outside the car shots.
Yeah.
And they had that one there.
Oh, man.
They were getting it prepped because they were going to put it on display for a little while when they opened the ride.
Oh,
so not only did I get to walk through the ride when it was still under construction, but I got to see the DeLorean.
You lucky bastard. The one that Doc rolled out of the trailer.
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. The hero.
See,
complete with the dent on the hood from when Michael J. Fox would slide across it in some of the shots.
Oh. See, you're just my brain is just like it's tearing asunder right now. Because that's
Geek Wars have begun.
Yeah, that's okay.
We should invite your viewers to try and top us with geekiness.
All I was gonna say is that one of my most popular videos is the tour of my DeLorean, where I did it in such a way.
Dude, I'd believe it.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. There's plenty of DeLorean videos on YouTube, of course. Mm-hmm. But the way I did mine was, I said, here's an up close and personal tour of a DeLorean as a car that's been used for 35 years. Not a museum show queen, not some dusty barn find, but one that was purchased originally in 1984. It's an 83 DeLorean, but it was bought in 84. Mm-hmm. And it's been run and used as a car. I used to deliver pizza in it for a couple years in high school.
That'd be a sight.
Dude, I had to... Okay, wow. So to finish the video...
Because to be honest, I think I've seen, other than the actual Back to the Future vehicle, I think in real life, I've seen DeLoreans out in public maybe 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
In my whole life.
Right. They're not a common sight to see. Actually, the first one I saw in real life is the one I bought. Like, that's how rare it was. So anyways, the video was just up close and personal of an actual, DeLorean, a used DeLorean, one that has not been refurbished. Anyways, the one thing I wanted to make sure that we got to before we just go like ultimate clash of geeking out of who's the bigger geek.
Yeah, right.
So the NES Classic, we all know about that. SNES Classic, we all know about that. hold on 1 second. I'm getting derailed again. Real quick. Our friends across the pond, especially in Europe and in England, and I don't think English like to be called Europeans. I think they like to.
Maybe not so much anymore, but
not because of Brexit, but because just like we are England. The sun never sets on England. We are not European. Anyways, they call it the NES and the SNES. I never called it that. I said NES and SNES. Was that?
Yeah,
I never heard any of my friends saying that either.
No, I've heard it more in recent years, even from American YouTubers. So if somebody says it, I know what they're saying.
Right.
You know, if somebody random, hey, did you see that NES game? I know what that is. But yeah, like when I was a kid, no way. It was always NES or Super. Actually, when I was a kid, it was just Nintendo.
Right. Okay.
You know, do you have a Nintendo? And it didn't really matter which one you had. It was just, do you have a Nintendo?
Right.
Same thing with a Sega. Do you have a Sega? Yeah, I've got a Sega.
Right. Sega does what Nintendo don't. Okay, so we know the classic NES, classic Super NES. I've heard rumblings on the internet, and to which I would agree with to a certain point, of people wanting a classic Game Boy. Mm-hmm. And now I'll ask what you think about it, but my initial thoughts are twofold. One, that would be awesome. Mm-hmm. Sure. I would absolutely buy a Game Boy Classic, if nothing but to collect it. Now, to me, the Game Boy Classic would have to, let's face it, our phones do everything, and there's lots of competition for space in our pockets. Mm-hmm. So how can you justify buying a Game Boy Classic that you have, fit in your pocket and carry around with you, even though you got your wallet in there and your phone, and like, they would have to make it in a form factor that is just slightly, I think it would be cool if they sold it for like $30 and it was, or I don't know, 50, but whatever the price, but it was the size and maybe slightly thicker than a credit card. That way it can fit in the pocket with you.
I haven't heard of that. I haven't heard that idea yet. That's a curious one. Because
there's I don't know if you see. Well, I'm blanking out on what company does it. There's this it's like a 4-bit credit card sized. It's like an Arduino something. Okay. That it's just black and white. Pixels are just black and white. It's like
I'm trying to remember the name on that one. Yeah.
But it holds like one game at a time, and it's about the thickness of a couple credit cards, and it fits super easy in your pocket. It has a D-pad and 2 buttons, and the form factor looks very interesting. The screen is, I don't know, 1.5 inches or whatever. I was like, if Nintendo could do something like that, to where it wouldn't take up much real estate in the pocket, and they could fit, I don't care, 30 games on it, on the system on chip or whatever. If they could do it in a form factor like that for like under $50, I think it would be a hit. I think it would win. Here's some of the flip side of my argument, though. Here's the devil's advocate. If you want a classic Game Boy, just buy a Game Boy, because they're still relatively cheap, and I'm not necessarily endorsing. I'll just say multi-carts.
Right.
That's all I'm gonna say. For a reasonable price, you could, emulate all the Game Boy games in some sort of way, but I don't even care about emulation. I like emulation, but if Nintendo sold a Game Boy Classic in that form factor that works, I'd be all over it. What do you think?
I'm with you on some of that, and not so much on others. The proposed Game Boy Classic, that's actually a topic that I've covered in one of my own podcasts, and a lot of it's based on comments that I've gotten on some of my YouTube videos, specifically ones where I talk about like the NES Classic, Super NES Classic. I think if Nintendo were to continue on with making more of those classic consoles, they'd probably just continue on with the home console line. So the next one would be the N64.
Right.
Which some people have tried to argue that, N64 emulation these days is so crap that there's no way, Nintendo would do it. And I'm sitting here thinking, look, Nintendo made the original N64.
Right.
If there's any company that could do a good emulator for it, it would be Nintendo. Or
Right.
worst case, they would just have access to all of the code for the original games that they would bundle
Yep.
and recompile it for something that it would work on.
Exactly.
But I can tell you, I agree, there would be a lot more excitement from fans of these classic consoles if they did a Game Boy. I wouldn't necessarily do the small credit card kind of thing, though. I don't think the form factor would necessarily matter. I think they would want to basically emulate the same size as whatever original Game Boy they decide to go with.
The brick from 1989.
Well, there's kind of some debate about that.
I think it'd be Game Boy Color.
I think the one that would make the most sense in terms of like being true to what the original console was like would be, the Game Boy Color. Because no matter what, you'd want to put a modern screen in it, right?
Right.
People would not accept the old green, reflective only screen.
No way.
So if you go with the Game Boy Color, the Color came with a color screen, and it wouldn't really be much of a stretch to switch that out for a backlit one.
Right.
And the Color played all the original Game Boy games out of the box. So it wouldn't really be all that weird or unnatural to have a mix of native Game Boy Color games and original Game Boy black and white games on there too. But at the same time, kind of like what we were talking about before, the people who are mostly supporting the gaming market are just casual gamers. They're not necessarily the diehards.
Right.
And Nintendo even admitted this themselves when they came out with the NES Classic, was they targeted that system at the casual gamers, or even the people in their like late 20s, early 30s who had completely fallen out of gaming,
right,
but remembered it from when they were kids. And the idea would be that they would see this thing sitting on the store shelf and they'd look at it and go, hey, I remember that.
Yeah.
And then they'd look at a price tag being one that they could afford, and they'd pick up the box and see, oh, there's a ton of games on here. And they'd throw it in the cart as an impulse buy.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the exact same thing that they did with the Super NES Classic, and I think they would have to do the same thing with the Game Boy.
Yeah.
So as weird as it would be, I think the one that makes the most sense from a marketing perspective would actually be, the DMG, the original Game Boy.
Right.
And then it would just be a matter of them trying to figure out, do they only go original Game Boy games and just do like a black and white screen in that console? Mm-hmm. Or do they say, you know what, this is the classic Game Boy, put a color screen in it, and then throw maybe some Game Boy Color games on there as well?
Right, maybe
which
with
would be kind of weird. I mean, it would be weird to be playing, like some of the color Pokemon titles on a DMG with a color screen.
Yeah.
But just that visual appeal of it looking like the original Game Boy that you remember hauling to school every day when you were in 4th grade or whatever.
Right.
That would be the marketing angle.
See, with the Game Boy Color, remember you could hold select and down or whatever. You could put it to grayscale. So maybe if they put it in that, if you want to have, they could put it in that green scale. They could emulate the look of that milky, disgusting green algae.
I'm sure that would
DMG.
be that could definitely be like one of those optional screen filter kind of things,
Right,
like
a shader.
Like on the SNES Classic, you can do the artificial scan lines for CRTs.
Right.
I know plenty of people would not want to turn that on,
No.
just based on how much demand there is for good quality looking, images
Right.
off of these retro consoles. Most people wouldn't turn it on, but I think some people for fun would.
Absolutely.
The big challenge that I see to a console like that is actually going to be the price.
Yeah.
There are so many really cool things that they could do with a Game Boy Classic. And let's assume that they go with the original DMG kind of style with a color screen in it. The build cost for them for some of the basic stuff would be pretty cheap. I mean, those LCDs go for like $1 or $2 these days in bulk quantity.
Right.
They could even reuse the architecture from the NES or SNES Classic, which those two are practically identical from a circuit board perspective anyway.
Yeah.
They've already got kind of the foundation for what that console could be, but the thing that would kill them would be they'd have to throw a battery in there.
Yeah.
And then what do you do about game licensing?
Yeah.
That's always going to be a factor. And then the optional things that could make or break the console, like link cable support. What do you do about link cable? And one of the ideas I had was forget doing a physical link cable, Bluetooth.
Right. Exactly.
let them pair through Bluetooth.
Right.
And then you kind of can start going into the weeds about, well, do you even put a cartridge slot on the thing? You know, maybe you could let the thing play original games. Right. Maybe not. Or what about an HDMI out port? Because plenty of people would want to hook that up to a TV and play it that way. And I think all of that stuff added together would push a console like that well above the ability for Nintendo to sell it for, say, $60 or $80.
Right.
I think in order for them to make a decent profit on it, you'd be looking at them charging $120 or so.
True.
And then suddenly it's like, well, why wouldn't I just buy like a 3DS?
True. On that note, let me pause it real quick here so we can get into the next segment. I'm not sure how much time we have left. The next segment might be kind of short. Colin, do you want to stick around for that?
I can do one more,
wrap up. All right.
Yeah.
We'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio. I'm going to check my time, see how much time we have left for the final segment, and we will be right back.